You talk about the modern traveler. Which broad demographic makes up the modern traveler?
We do have a sort of an overall archetype of what the modern traveler looks like, and I can kind of paint a picture for you, if you will.
What story does Onera tell?
The story of Onera that's wrapped around like myself as a founder. I mean, that was one that you connected with. I think that everybody's different. The name Onera means dream in Greek. So the idea was always that you're stepping into this dream world out of the hustle and bustle of daily life, and you're tucked into this enchanted forest, but you're just off of Main Street.
How would you recommend somebody creates that story or unique design element?
If you don't want to go that route, I feel like you really have two options.
I kind of want to switch this question up a little bit. If you had to start all over again, is that the first thing you would do?
You know, capital raising in public, we are sharing renderings in public well before they're even in like construction document form.
Do you think you're gonna expand geographically, or are you trying to like hit a bigger revenue number?
Corner the market in Texas. No, we're definitely interested in expanding more broadly.
Ben Wolff is reinventing the hospitality industry. Ben is the co-founder of Onera and Oasi, which are companies that build experiential hotels, or as Ben and I talk about in the interview, the future of hospitality. As you know, in these interviews, I only ask questions I'm genuinely curious about. And with Ben, I was curious who the modern traveler is and what type of person makes up that avatar. If building in public is detrimental to a founder that eventually would like to step back. And finally, I asked questions about the mergers and acquisitions activity going on in the short-term rental space. Specifically, I was curious about who is buying who, like is it acquisition entrepreneurs, is it competitors, or is it private equity? This interview was f***ing amazing, and I'm so thankful that Ben took the time out of his day to share his gold coins with us. If you want to invest in his new project, Oasi Hill Country, an experiential hotel in Texas, you can go to the link in bio or you can go to strlift.com. I'll have the link there as well. You talk about the modern traveler, and you can get as technical as you want. Which broad demographic makes up the modern traveler?
Yeah, so I'm not going to get too technical here, but we do have a sort of an overall archetype of what the modern traveler looks like, and I can kind of paint a picture for you, if you will. So, you know, they're the hip, cool person going to the new cool destinations, trendsetter among their friends, you know, probably going to Burning Man, Coachella, though Coachella maybe isn't cool enough anymore. Like that kind of, you know, archetype drives a Tesla, wears an Apple Watch. I mean, definitely tech forward, very interested in experience, wants to spend money on experiences and authentic experiences, right? Where they have a connection to maybe the property, to the founder, and they want to create lasting memories. They want to share their experience on social. They certainly don't want to get bogged down by a hotel front desk experience where they're waiting in line and, you know, they traveled for a full day and they have this transactional interaction with the front desk person where they ask them how their day was. They'd rather just get their code, get into their unit and get on with their authentic, unique stay. So that's kind of a high level. And we think about how do we collaborate with our guests as opposed to having more of a transactional experience. And that's what the modern traveler wants. They want collaboration and genuine connection.
You talk about how the modern traveler, you know, wants to be in a story. You know what I mean by that? Like, yeah. I've been reading your Twitter, you know?
Yeah.
What story does Onera tell? And you can pick whichever one you want.
Yeah. So look, there's the story of Onera that's wrapped around like myself as a founder. I mean, that was one that you connected with. I think that everybody's different. So that's one, like if they kind of gravitate to me and the kind of stuff that I'm building and how I'm trying to innovate hospitality, that could be an emotional connection to the property where they want to come stay and experience it. Like I've been shocked how many people that, you know, saw me on, let's say like a Shelby Church, you know, video interview, right? That's much more focused on business. And then they come and stay at the property because they were interested in me and what Onera kind of stands for. Now, from its inception, the name Onera means dream in Greek. So the idea was always that you're stepping into this dream world, you know, out of the hustle and bustle of daily life. And you're tucked into this enchanted forest, but you're just off of Main Street. So you still have all this accessibility to Main Street, Fredericksburg, the restaurants, the shops. And then Fredericksburg itself has kind of a story. And we talk about, you know, destinations that have a costume, right? I mean, Coachella certainly has that. Fredericksburg has that. It's, you know, the Stetson hats, the cowboy boots. Basically you're walking into this vintage pioneer town that feels kind of like Wild Wild West. So that's the Fredericksburg experience. And then Onera provides this like magical enchanted forest vibe as well. So you have this very like, I would say deep and immersive experience on a couple different elements.
Well, you mentioned like Fredericksburg, like the town. Is that why you initially bought there? Is because they already kind of had that experiential part built in?
So I don't think I was far enough down the path to know that's why I was buying in Fredericksburg, right? I
Okay.
was more like looking at the numbers, and the numbers jumped off the page in terms of couples getaway type units. So like 1 and 2 bedrooms that were generating these massive revenues. Like you'd see a 2-person cabin that was kind of cool, maybe called a tree house, but not really a tree house, doing 100 grand a year. And that was compelling. And I think part of the reason for that is Fredericksburg has a story, it has a vibe. People are going to kind of get in character, and that's part of the draw.
I love the name Onera so much more now. Now that I know the backstory on
Yeah,
it.
very good.
Okay, what are the steps to success for hosts that want to create a story with their existing property that lacks character or unique design elements? And to like back this question up, most of the people that subscribe to STR Lift and kind of mostly the people where I'm from in the Midwest kind of just throw a house on Airbnb and they tidy it up a little bit, but if the way everything is going is story and experiential, they might have issues with that. So how would you recommend somebody creates that story or unique design element?
So if you're not going to invest heavily in amenities or a new design or creating this cool like offshoot unit, you could create like a relatively inexpensive like treehouse platform or something like that where you can get amazing content. If you don't want to go that route, I feel like you really have two options. And they're almost related in some ways. So one is building in public, right? I talk about that all the time. You've seen that. Even if you're doing a run-of-the-mill kind of short-term rental renovation, and ideally like the cooler the reno is and the more dilapidated maybe the house was to begin with, the more engaging the story is because there's more of a challenge, right? If the house was, a tear down and you're kind of showing what it was and then what you're turning it into. So if you can share your experience as a founder with the world, with all the challenges and mistakes and wins and successes along the way, then people can get bought into your story. You develop this fan base throughout the process of your renovation, of creating your business. So that's one. Another one would be creating like a persona associated with the property. Now, examples of this would be if you look at like Ryanair, they use humor really well. Like Ryanair, right, it has a pretty massive Instagram and probably Twitter following as well. And it's all based on humor and kind of self-deprecating, right? They're constantly cracking jokes at their own expense. And you have the plane that's sort of a caricature of somebody's, of a face that's always making these kind of snide expressions and things like that. So you can lean into a persona, and that could be a person, it could be a character, but there needs to be something that people want to engage with. And something we say a lot, and we may get more into in future questions, but we always say that people love people, and that can also be characters or a story, right? They love or they like brands. So brands are okay, especially if they're connected to a person or a story, but typically they hate businesses. So the more you can get away from being kind of like a sterile transactional business and more towards a brand or a person or a character, the better chance you have on social.
This is a little bit separate of an industry, and this is a total rabbit hole. But with STR Lift, I was planning on marketing it as this like brand, and this is going to be a perfect segue into my next question, because when it comes to like perceived value, and when somebody would want to buy this as an asset, I was like, nobody's going to want to buy me because I'm not going to want to stick around. But then the second I switched it to a personal brand, it's like I'm making all these connections. Like I'm connecting with you and like other people in the space, and it's like, okay, there's levels to it, I believe. Like there's levels to where you can make like these pivots and shifts.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what you're getting at is if the brand is you, how do you sell the brand, right? Or
Yeah.
how do you, how does it have a sustainable multiple, right? How does somebody
Yep.
think about it? And I think there's examples out there that a brand was built largely on a personal brand and story, and ultimately a good product. I mean, you need to have that as well. And then even when that person goes away, either through death or moving on, right, with their career, that brand and company still has long-term sustainable value. Look at Apple, right? One of the biggest, most successful companies out there. I mean, Steve Jobs was, and even to some extent still is, Apple, but he's gone. He's been gone for years, and Apple is still doing extraordinarily well. So I think when you get to a certain size, you can kind of overcome that sort of individual personality connected to the brand. As long as you have great people, you've sort of built them up, and the company sort of continues along without a hitch, right? That's a big piece of it. And when people can believe that and see that, then I think you're fine. Another example on a much smaller scale, you probably seen Isaac French, Live Oak Lake. He's a buddy of mine. If you haven't, he's got a 7-cabin experiential landscape hotel that he actually sold, did well on. He shared it all over Twitter, LinkedIn. And between conversations I had with him, the people that bought Live Oak Lake, they also were buying the Instagram, the following, and the brand, which is different from Onera. With Onera, we actually didn't sell that stuff. We just sold the real estate. But he did. And from talking to him, they valued the Instagram, his following, and the brand at millions of dollars, like well over $1 million. And I don't know if there's a brand out there that's as tied as much to a person as Live Oak Lake is to Isaac French. So they bought it. So clearly there are some buyers out there for it. And then it's, okay, what do you do with it from there? But there's clearly a market for it. I think you can still create immense brand value. And it's certainly the best and easiest way to grow.
Yes. My next question was going to be, for a host that want to invest in social media marketing and create a brand, what tips would you give them? The more I look on your Twitter and on your social media profiles, you're really passionate about the building in public. So
Definitely.
So I kind of want to switch this question up a little bit. If you had to start all over again, is that the first thing you would do?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'd be, as much as I could, or hire someone to help me do it, like out there with a GoPro, right? And getting content all along the way, showing the build, showing the construction. So we'd have these amazing before and afters. I think, Devin Lorup's an amazing example of that with Pacific Bin.
Yep.
He amassed, over 1 million followers for a single unique stay Airbnb, all because he showed the journey, right? He showed his trials and tribulations of getting the thing, designed and built and up and running, and still continued to share after that. So people had a connection to him, a connection to the property. So yeah, I believe building in public is the way of the future. Right now we're currently doing our newest development, Oasi Hill Country, fully in public. So we are capital raising in public. We are sharing renderings in public well before they're even in like construction document form. So, I'm talking about it all over, the internet, on podcasts. So with this next project, really trying to do it right from the start in terms of sharing it with the world.
And honestly, as a consumer, I've never been to Texas before, and that's what's probably going to get me to go to Texas.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
There's just this amazing connection that you can foster person to person. And now I've been in a bunch of podcasts, right? So people have heard me talk, and they kind of feel like they know you, and they've heard you, talk for a few different podcasts. I think it's something like it takes 7 hours for you to feel like you get to know somebody. There's now like 20 hours of me talking on podcasts on the internet. So I hop on calls with people, and they feel like they know me already, or there's a trust there. They believe in my ability to operate and execute, and that, I've had a track record and success in the space. So it helps with the brand, right? With Onera and getting people to stay and book, but it's extraordinarily valuable in terms of business development, in terms of people coming to us and saying, hey, can you do our social media and digital marketing for us? Like, you've had success. And we do that. We offer third-party services. And as of late, there's just been this amazing influx of people that want to try to leverage our expertise to, in a lot of cases, bring them direct bookings. In some cases, like, help them build their personal brand, like I have in the past year.
Well, and I've read this somewhere, but they say that like building in public or like going on podcasts is like the best networking tool you can do now.
Yeah, it's one to many, right? It's the
Hmm.
classic, like instead of one to one, it's, one to a whole bunch of people, and they can really feel like they know me after an hour long conversation.
Yeah.
So even though like a short form video might go viral, I think long form is super valuable because you really feel like you get to know the person, and much a much stronger trust built in that medium.
We could keep going on this, but my last thought on it is like, especially with you, is I kind of did all the groundwork research so we could skip like the where'd you come from? Like tell me about McKinsey. You know what I mean? Like we could skip that whole thing. And what I really wanted to do is like ask you questions that maybe you haven't been asked before or like don't really think about it a lot. Or more importantly, I'm more interested in like your new course coming out or like the new projects you're working on. Like the future stuff that just we're not really talking about the past anymore because at this point people should know about that, and if they don't, they can just go on other podcasts.
100%. And I really appreciate that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've told my story, right, of the 8 to 200 Airbnbs to being in the Philippines when,
Yeah.
COVID hit and my whole team was devastated. I mean, I've told this story so many times, it's hard to like get up for it, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
Draymond Green and people in the NBA talk about like getting up for a Tuesday game in November against like the 10th or 11th seed in the conference. And it's hard to do, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's great to get new questions and really, force me to think a little bit and talk about the future for sure.
Well, and it's the stuff you're thinking about. You're not thinking
Yep.
about the 200 properties and COVID, and that
It's
was for you.
old
Yep.
news, right? I got
Yep.
asked on a podcast last week, what project are you most excited about or nearest and dearest to your heart? And I'm like, isn't that answer obvious? It's the next one, right?
The next one.
It's
Yep.
always the next one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I want to dive into because you're the only person in the space that I'm aware of that's into the mergers and acquisitions. As far as like what I've seen, and so I'm curious: is mergers and acquisitions in the short-term rental space becoming more popular?
Yeah, so it's interesting you ask that, and you think of me as somebody that like maybe knows. I don't think I'm an expert here at all, right? We sold
Mhm.
Onera Fredericksburg. We did really well on it. We sold it to a public company, which is great from a track record standpoint. Like when a public company buys you, it's sort of like a due diligence stamp of approval. So that's been
Mhm.
super, helpful for us. Um, Sort of tangentially, anecdotally, I've been seeing quite a bit of consolidation in the space. I don't know if that's because you kind of need scale to make money now because margins have gotten squeezed if you're not like super unique and differentiated like Onera. So I think there's some of that going on. I know of companies like Avantstay and some other companies. Portero is a newer one that a buddy of mine runs, Dustin, and their strategy is going out and acquiring a bunch of smaller project management groups. In a lot of cases, it's just kind of bringing on those contracts, right?
Sure.
And then there's public and private REITs and other institutional investors that have been looking at buying portfolios of short-term rentals for a while. I don't know if there's still been any that have sold at a cap rate like Onera did. I think there's only been these kind of more landscape hotels, multi-unit, you could say short-term rental communities that have sold at cap rates, but a distributed portfolio, I don't think we've seen it yet.
Okay.
In an area where regulation is sort of determined and it's very kind of more of a mature industry, I could see that happening. It just hasn't happened yet.
Okay. And would you say the biggest buyers in the space right now? I mean, it's probably like the pie chart's probably all over the place, but would you say that it's probably mostly acquisition entrepreneurs? So guys kind of like who have cash that just want to get into the space.
Yeah, or you could look at it as consolidation. So I think that those are actually, I think of them as slightly different buckets. So one is the entrepreneur that's kind of made their money somewhere else and wants to invest in something and then sure grow it. And then maybe he would do further acquisitions.
Hmm.
So I know a buddy that like made his money in the entertainment agency world and then bought a luxury, one of the nicer, better branded short-term rental companies in New England. So he owns, a bunch of properties across actually the Northeast, not just New England. And they have a nice little brand and he's growing it and trying to optimize it. And then there's other companies like the Avantstay, Portero of the world that are typically like VC or private equity backed and they're trying to buy up smaller players to achieve growth, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what they're doing at all costs. So it's a slightly different, I think, archetype of acquirer. And then there's PE that's definitely interested in the space and becoming increasingly interested, and REITs to some extent. I mean, we proved that REITs have interest, and I know other ones have interest as well because they're sniffing around, talking to people within my org, or our GC gets talked to by other REITs. So I know there's interest there for sure. And when you look at the numbers, like the REIT Summit Hotel Properties that bought us out put out a public report showing our EBITDA per key. And our EBITDA per key is, $90,000 or so per unit, which is much more than a lot of hotels out there. I mean, I think it's actually more than the one Hotel Miami, what I've been told recently. So our numbers are off the charts, and so that's going to get other institutional players interested.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm curious. Is like this, it's such a great business, and I'm just surprised that private equity is not a bigger player in the game yet. And I wonder if it has something to do with like the restrictions and like the gray area in the space, but it almost kind of looks like you've avoided that gray area part because you're what 75% mainly direct bookings or something.
Well, and also just because we consider ourselves a hotel, and that's how we build. We build as a hotel. That's the certificate of occupancy that we're getting, right? Is hotel. So we don't have to worry about any of those regulatory challenges and issues. I think part of the reason that PE has been a little slow is that money's just not flowing right now in general,
Yeah.
just based on the broader economic environment. I think Blackstone is just starting to make some significant investments, and hopefully that's a signal to the market that, hey, it's time to get in. Usually with a lot of these institutional players, they look at Blackstone and some of these other bigger groups and they just kind of copycat. When they start moving, then they'll move. And it's smart too, right? Because Blackstone, very well capitalized, they have thousands probably of analysts, right, that are diligencing this kind of stuff, and they have really good industry information. So if they're buying, it's a really good indicator that it's time to buy.
It's time to buy. Yep.
Yeah.
You follow this can be a cut, but do you follow ITR Economics?
I don't think so. Is that Twitter?
No, it's a company. I think they have a Twitter. Look it up. Brian Bulio, I don't know, is the CEO.
Gotcha. I see it now. Yeah. But no, I don't know
Yeah.
them.
Take a look at because they predict with a 97% accuracy rate where everything's going in like a 10-year time horizon.
Wow.
And 2024 to 2026, they say like $2 trillion of PE money
It's going to be flowing.
is going to be flowing. Yep.
Well, that's great. I hope it happens soon because I'm capital raising right now, and it still feels like there's a lot of people on the sidelines. So that would be fantastic.
Look them up because or like read some of their stuff because it's so far been pretty on the money.
Yeah.
Just in like
Nice.
it's pretty
I'll
interesting.
check it out. I'll let the PE firms we're looking at know. I'll be like, hey guys, like everybody's getting in. I don't know what you're doing, but it might be time to
Yeah.
invest.
Yeah. Last question, just because this is probably my favorite question for you, is what's the vision past Hill Country?
Yeah. So Oasi is designing, building, and operating hotels for the modern traveler. That's what we are already doing, and that's what we want to continue to do. And we want to scale. So the travel industry is like, it's like 1.2 trillion globally, kind of insane. It's like 10% of global GDP. And I think I would have to estimate, I don't know this number for sure, but it's got to be less than 1% that is this experiential type product that the modern traveler wants. So, I mean, that's a massive opportunity. It's at minimum a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. So we want to go after that. And that's going to be through properties that we build. It's going to be through empowering other entrepreneurs that want to get in this space. I think you may have seen that we're going to be rolling out a mastermind later this year. Very tight-knit, 10 to 15 people likely for every group, so that I can give a lot of one-on-one attention to those folks and help build them up and increase the likelihood of success. And ultimately, we want to raise a bigger fund for this space and invest in those people as well as our own projects, and really, help shape the landscape of travel and of modern hospitality, which it just hasn't been innovated much at all for decades and decades.
Yeah.
The biggest innovation that hotels have come up with is like loyalty rewards points for, since like the 80s, it feels like, right? And I don't even know when loyalty rewards points started, but it was a long time ago, right? And I don't feel they've been kind of innovating at the margins besides for that. And so I just think it leads a massive opportunity, in my belief, the biggest opportunity in real estate that I've seen in my lifetime to try to innovate hospitality to meet the needs of the modern traveler.
Hey, that's what I'm trying to do up here.
Yeah,
Before I
love
even
it.
knew that there was an opportunity for it, like before I even like found you and all these other guys in the space trying to innovate, like I was just like, I just want to make cool places, you know?
You want to make places that are going to inspire people, right? That they're
Mhm.
attracted to, that they come and they say, wow. I mean, we have this internal metric now for properties, but I think it also holds true for the structures we build as well as the land. If when you come to one of our properties, you don't feel autonomically compelled to whip out your phone and take a video, like impulsively without even thinking, then we miss the mark. So
Mhm.
I think that's what we're going for. And 99% of hotels out there do not hit that mark, not even close.
No, no. I mean,
Yeah.
especially up here, the nicest thing we got is like a Holiday Inn with breakfast, you know?
Yeah. And Holiday Inn's great. It's a great business
Yeah.
model. They provide a quality, clean room at a good price, but there's a ton of people out there that would be happy to and want to spend more to have a one of a kind experience.
Do you think you're gonna expand geographically, or are you trying to like hit a bigger revenue number?
Corner of the market in Texas. So no, we're definitely interested in expanding more broadly.
Okay.
I think that, right now in Central Texas and really just the Texas Hill Country, properties that we've built is going to be just under 100 rooms once we're fully built out. And that's Onera Fredericksburg, Onera Wimberley, and then the new property that I'm going to be building, Oasi Hill Country. And I mean, that's a drop in the bucket relative to the size of the market. So, not worried about saturation. It's a $5 billion market, 5 million tourists a year. And there's like no high end luxury product. There is more unique stay product coming online, but most of it's mid tier. And that's one of the reasons that we're trying to reach to the higher levels of luxury and upscale, and just one of a kind builds and structures. So that's the Hill Country. We have some immediate, near term plans to do some stuff in Florida, and then some midterm plans in Southern California. And some of those are wrapped into this concept of bringing a Costa Rica, Bali, or Tulum style experience stateside. So a tropical landscape resort, if you will, mixed with an exotic fruit agritourism experience. So, you could be picking cherimoyas or dragon fruit. There's a farm to table cafe and juicery on site, very, wellness oriented, and you're kind of enveloped in this exotic fruit jungle.